after the talk.
All right, so yeah, let's get started. Pawel Urbanek, as I was introduced, Heroku and RDS for startups, why and how. This is my talk. So yeah, to start with a few words about myself, I have around 8 years commercial experience mostly as a Ruby on Rails full stack developer, and I am also a AWS Certified Solutions Architect Associate. So currently I make a living mostly out of my project, Abbott. You can check it out later if you want. This is a simple and highly configurable tool for sending anonymous messages in Slack to improve communication. And I'm also regularly blogging on my blog, pawelurbanek.com. And this talk is based on one of my blog posts, so if you would like to recap it later, you can check it out there. And I also offer Rails performance-related consulting services. So yeah, today we'll be talking about Heroku. I guess most of you are aware what that is. I would ask you to raise hands, but I can see only a few of you who's been using it before, but I assume most of you did. So if some of you did not use it, don't know it, this is so-called PaaS, platform as a service. So basically, it gives you access to very high level of abstraction commands that let you very easily set up hosting for your application. So you have this Heroku create command, and boom, your web servers are up and running. And the other command is Heroku add-ons create Postgres, and you have database provisioned. And from my experience, that's how many of the Rails projects start. You add new Heroku app, you type a couple of magic commands, and that's it, you're up and running. Yeah, so that's how my experience working as a Ruby on Rails developer was. So yeah, if you provision a Heroku database using the magical command, you also get access to other Heroku CLI command like Heroku PG backups. You can very easily perform backups, restore your backups, etc., etc. And you also have access to more advanced tools like adding so-called follower databases or read replicas, however you call them. So it's still just very simple commands. You don't have to have any kind of DevOps knowledge to use them. And then you also have access to something called Heroku PG Extras. I don't know if you've used it before, but it is an open source library, and it gives you an access to a whole range of very interesting metrics about the performance of your database. I don't have time to deep dive into them right now, but one of them that's very useful is so-called cache hit, because based on the cache hit, you can determine when your database needs to be scaled up. Basically, well-configured Postgres instance is mostly using only RAM for reading data. So if your cache hit ratio is below 99%, you should then consider scaling your database up. And in Heroku, it's also super easy. You have another magical command. You just type Heroku add-ons upgrade. You choose your plan. And it's very easy with Heroku to just throw money at your performance issues. You don't need to think too much. If you have big enough budget, you can go very far without thinking about optimizing performance. And yeah, and then you start climbing up this ladder. You start with a relatively low-priced plans of Heroku database, but then you just scale up. And there's, I think the most important plans are a couple $1,000 a month or something. I'm not sure. And that's more or less the state that one of my previous projects was in. We are using Heroku for web servers. We are using Heroku database for database, and we are quite okay with that. We weren't overthinking it too much. But then the year 2018 came. This is the meme from back then. Don't know if you've seen it before. But the GDPR EU laws were introduced. So yeah, I'm not, that full disclaimer, I'm not a lawyer. This is not a legal advice, so you shouldn't base your legal actions based on what I'm telling to you right now. And as I assume most of you are UK based, so I have totally no idea how GDPR relates to the Brexit. I think it's like super complex legal abstract how it could work. But yeah, from what I know is that GDPR favors so-called personally identifiable identifiable user's data, it favors it to be located in the EU. So if you are serving European customers, you shouldn't really export their data to the United States, because it could be seen as GDPR laws infringement by some kind of legal guys who check it. So yeah, that's when the GDPR rules were supposed to go live. We were doing some kind of legal audit of the services we are using, and to our big surprise, what we discovered was this kind of exchange between me and the Heroku support. I think you won't have time to look into it in detail right now, but you can check it out on my blog. So long story short is that even if your Heroku app is located in the European Union, parts of your Postgres data are still located in the United States, namely backups, logs, and data clips. So I think in terms of GDPR, this is definitely personally identifiable data. So it could lead us to some trouble if we didn't change it. So we started thinking about what we should do, how we should change our infrastructure to be more GDPR compliant. And we thought about Amazon RDS. It was an obvious solution for us because we've had experience with it before. And if some of you don't know it, this is a managed relational database service offered by Amazon. It handles not only PostgreSQL but databases, but also I think MySQL, MariaDB, I think Oracle as well. I'm not sure, I don't remember of them, but there's like 8 engines or something that Amazon AWS offers. So we thought about it, but we had a couple of doubts if it would be a good tool for us. So the first doubt we had was the performance. Won't there be any negative performance impact if we switch to using RDS instead of Heroku? And the answer was no, because Heroku uses AWS under the hood. So these are exactly the same data centers. So if you are using Heroku Europe, then your physical servers are located in the EU West 1 AWS Ireland region. And if you are using Heroku United States, then it's in AWS North Virginia. So I don't have any graphs to show you, but from my experience when we were migrating a project with considerable traffic from Heroku to RDS, we didn't see any kind of performance delay before and after making the switch. So that doubt was like checked out. We didn't have to worry about it. What about security? If you provision RDS instance in the Amazon VPC is Virtual Private Cloud, you have to do it, it has to be publicly accessible. So-called Heroku public spaces, I think they're called public spaces, don't offer a way to do so-called VPC peering between Heroku and AWS networks. So if you provision an RDS instance, it has to be publicly accessible. So we thought it might not be secure enough that it's publicly accessible, but we realized that Heroku does it exactly the same way. Any kind of Heroku database that you have provisioned is publicly accessible from the internet. So there isn't anything like public internal networks in Heroku public spaces. So this is the same. And to be honest, using RDS can be more secure than using Heroku because RDS offers something called SSL mode verify full that is offered by Postgres. I won't go into details here, but it goes down to the fact that if you are connecting to the Heroku database from the public Wi-Fi, you are vulnerable to so-called man-in-the-middle attack, and there is no way to protect yourself against it if you use Heroku database. But with RDS, you can by using custom certificate. So we didn't have to worry about security, but what about pricing? So yeah, AWS is known to be expensive, but I think that Heroku is known to be even more expensive. And here you can see the comparison of two comparable plans from Heroku and RDS. And you can see that for 8 gigs of RAM on Heroku compared to RDS, you are saving around $30 a month. But if you have 16 gigs of RAM, then you are saving over $100 a month. So it will start adding up, I think, very quickly. So if you are on one of the top tier plans on Heroku, then switching to RDS will most probably offer considerable money savings for you. I'm comparing mostly RAM because from my experience, RAM is the first element that starts bottlenecking for you. You will probably start missing RAM before you start missing any other component of your database, like disk space or CPU. So yeah, you will notice here that for Heroku, the max connections is hard-coded, and for RDS, I coded custom. And I did it because for Heroku, you cannot touch any of the config variables for your Postgres. So they are like hard-coded, you cannot modify them. So it's entirely possible that you will start bottlenecking on the maximum number of connections when you use Heroku, while your hardware, your RAM and CPU could still handle more clients. So you will be forced to upgrade your Heroku plan, not because you are missing the hardware, but only because you are missing the config setting that Heroku does not let you tweak. With RDS, you have much more fine-tuned control about all the config variables of Postgres. So it requires a bit more experience in knowing what you should tweak and how, but gives you much more freedom and much more flexibility in maxing out the capabilities of your hardware that you are paying for. So talking about the config variables, these are the variables I usually tweak when optimizing database for my clients. So Heroku assumes the one best value and you cannot touch it. There's no way to do it. But in RDS, you can tweak it however you want. So I think it's entirely possible that if you stay on Heroku and will have some kind of specific database usage later on, it could be some kind of ceiling for you that you cannot tweak the variables. So yeah, you can probably see that I'm very optimistic about Heroku, talking about RDS, talking only about the superlatives. But yeah, there are some downsides. For me, the biggest downside was this was displayed on this screen. I don't know if you recognize it, but these are so-called the data clips. If you don't know Heroku data clips, this is a way to do version-controlled queries in your database. It's an amazing tool for less technical members of your team. So you can basically write a query for them. They can execute it, export it to CSV, to JSON. It is all secure and version control. So we are using it quite heavily in our project. And when we migrated to RDS, we are missing it quite a lot. So we managed to replicate it somehow with visual tools such as this PG admin. You can somehow replicate the same behavior for less technical members, but it requires some kind of training for them, and it's not as that simple to use. But yeah, this is the biggest downside. I think currently in the market there is not drop-in replacement for Heroku data clips, unfortunately. So yeah, another part I was missing after moving from Heroku database to RDS was the PG Extras library I mentioned to you before, but I was missing it, and it was an open source library, so I re-implemented it in different languages so that you can use it outside of Heroku. So currently you have Ruby, Node.js, Elixir, and Python implementations available. And you can check out this blog post for more details on how to use this library. But from my experience, this is my go-to tool if I want to see debug some kind of performance issues in database. It gives you lots of insights into what's going on in the database. And talking about insights, Heroku offers very limited way to see what's going on in the database, but RDS, to contrary, you can use a tool called CloudWatch. With a couple of clicks, you can set up those informative dashboards that let you check different metrics of the database very easily. So at a glance, you can just visit the dashboard and see if everything is okay in your database. So it's super useful tool as well. And also very easily you can set up custom alerting system. It's using a so-called SNS, Simple Notification Service. So you have loads of target channels available. It can be made custom with Lambda or just email alerts that you can customize or forward to Slack, whatever. But this is also super useful. And if you want to go all pro, there is also this very low-level metrics. It's called RDS Enhanced Monitoring. So despite you don't have in RDS, you don't have access to the system of the database, you have access to these very low-level metrics. Honestly, I didn't have to use them so far, never. But I think that if you have some kind of very specific use case or very specific problems, having this insight compared to not having it could be a lifesaver for you. So yeah, what about practical difference working with Heroku and working with RDS? For me, it was mastering those command line tools, because you no longer have the handy magical Heroku CLI commands that you can use to perform different actions with your database. So you have to learn those Postgres-related CLI tools, like PSQL, pgdump, pgrestore. So yeah, they're pretty straightforward if you take time to learn them, and I think every developer, even if you are not DevOps, should know how to use them, because it's like the basics of Postgres. Yeah, and coming to the big question, do you need much DevOps experience to migrate your database to RDS? So it was, as it was mentioned before, I will do a little sales pitch of my ebook that I recently wrote. This is written on the basis of my experience when I was, my main experience was as a Ruby developer, a Rails developer. I didn't have much DevOps experience, and I was tasked with migrating Heroku database to RDS. So this is the ebook written from the perspective of someone with very limited DevOps experience, with almost no AWS experience, who wants to move the Heroku database to RDS in a safe way without risking data corruption or some kind of expanded downtime. So I will be honest with you, this is not in any way super unique knowledge. If you Google Heroku migrate RDS, you will find a lot of very high quality blog posts covering it. But I think what's differentiates my ebook from it is that it covers basically all the topics in it, the whole range of topics that are relating to doing the migrations, like minimizing the downtime and adding redundant cross accounts backups that I think not all the projects have, but definitely should, to avoid losing your data if there is some kind of access compromise on your primary account. So yeah, you can see how the ebook looks. It covers the very basic things like setting up the security groups that you might be that you probably know if you used AWS before. It also covers more intermediate topics like configuring those PostgreSQL performance-related variables. And also, I think it's one of the more useful parts where I tell you how to measure the expected downtime and how to minimize it. You can see that if you do the migration properly, you can reduce the downtime duration by 600% if you use the EC2 instance instead of doing it locally. So yeah, that's it. And there are the prices like $50 about $1. And if you want to buy it for yourself, if you want to buy it for your company, it's more expensive. But as was mentioned, you can use the discount code for 30% off for the next week. And AWS, easy to remember. I will share my slides later so that you have access to all the links and also to the code. So yeah, that's it. I hope it wasn't too salesy the last two minutes. So I'm ready for your questions if we have some. I think we have a couple of minutes for it.
I have one question actually. About backups. So with Heroku, it's kind of very simplistic. And in AWS, there is like a range, I imagine, of possible options. What would you recommend when you migrate from Heroku? What would be like? Would you recommend keeping the default settings or doing something different?
RDS as a fully managed database system has the very robust backups system built in by default. You get so-called snapshot backups that you can easily schedule, like using Lambda or using some kind of cron tool to take snapshots of your database, and you can easily provision new databases from it. But even better tool that RDS offers is the continuous backup. So I think the maximum window time frame is 1 week past or 2 weeks past, I'm not sure. At least minimum is 1 week, but every database by default has this continuous backup enabled. So you can very easily roll back your database to, let's say, 4 days ago at 2:30 p.m. So this is like a very robust backup system that AWS offers. But maybe let me expand on the secondary backups mechanism that I described. It's that by default, all your backups or your data is stored only in the primary account, in only the primary AWS account that you have. So imagine that by mistake, you compromise your AWS access credentials. I did it at least once already, putting them in the public repo. So if you lose your admin credentials and someone manages to compromise your account with admin access, he can remove everything. So if you don't have some kind of secondary backup system, you will lose all your data. And I think in most cases, your startup would be like dead if you lose everything and you have no way to restore it. So I think that apart from the built-in backup system that AWS offers, you should always think about, you should always also think about setting up this secondary backup system that is replicated to a separate account that nobody from your company has access to. Well, no, nobody, like only the top trusted people.
Thanks, that was super helpful. We have a question from Rick. On a scale of 1 to 10, easy to hard, where would you put the ongoing operational challenge of Heroku and RDS and others?
Well, once you are past the migration, there is not much difference. I would even give RDS higher note because of the additional insights you have. In Heroku, if something is wrong, you can only guess what is wrong. Or yes, I don't have good experience with monitoring Heroku databases. They give you very, very limited insights of what's going on. But with RDS, if you set it up correctly, if you set up the correct monitoring dashboards, if you set up the automatic alerts, I also explained how to do it in my ebook, then you will know about the issues if anything is going wrong with your database before it affects your clients, if you set up the alarm thresholds correctly. So I would give RDS even a higher note than Heroku as for the operational, how you call it, challenge. Yeah.
Thanks.
I mean, RDS is easier. RDS is easier.
Yeah. I understood. Yeah, that's a great answer. Because that's obviously like one of that's almost like the more important question. That assuming the migration is possible, AWS is complicated. how much more complicated is it going to be to operate than Heroku? So yeah, that's a great answer. Thanks.
Any other questions from anyone?
Coded max connection, somebody that doesn't like it. So yeah, no more questions. All right.
Okay, that was amazing talk. Thanks, Paul. Sorry for mispronouncing your name. Thanks, Pawel.
It's tricky. Yeah, Pawel.
Great talk.
Yeah, thanks for your attention.
Okay, then our next speaker. Let me briefly share my screen again to introduce our next speaker.